Hello, Hey Boomer listeners. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host for Hey Boomer. And wherever you are listening to us from, welcome. We're so glad to have you. When I first spoke to Dr. Bob Saul, who is our guest today, I was very curious about his compassion, his commitment to being an advocate for children and parents, the books that he had written, and all the work that he was doing in that field. And so my intention for today's show was to talk to Dr. Saul about what it means to raise good citizens and advocate for children, and why, at a time when he could be, sitting back by the lake, he is still committed to his work of advocating for children. In the past week or so, my intention has shifted a little bit. It has shifted because of something that happened over the past week when I was visiting my son. Now, as you know, children have been dealing with the reality of the pandemic for the past couple of years. They've been aware of gun violence in their schools. They were aware of the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. And then in this past week, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, their fears have gone up. And I realized this last week when I was visiting my son, as I said, and we were playing a game, and my 14-year-old granddaughter suddenly said, "My life, I've had to live through this pandemic, and now we might be getting ready to head into World War III, a nuclear war." And my son and I just kind of looked at each other, was like, how do you address this? We did not address it at the time, but it is a concern for the children today. And it made me think back to when I was growing up, in the 60s. And I lived in Miami, so we were not far from Cuba. And the Cuban Missile Crisis was creating a lot of fear in myself and my peers. I was about 9 then. And then there was the President Kennedy assassination, Martin Luther King's assassination, Robert Kennedy's assassination, the riots with the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War protests. All of these things created a lot of fear in us as young children and teenagers. And so it really pressed some buttons, some compassion, some concerns in me that now my grandchildren are dealing with fears about their safety. And so that's something that I think as grandparents and as parents, if we can get some insight into how to address those questions and concerns and maybe relate some of our experiences, that's going to be helpful to the kids. So that will be part of our discussion today. But before I bring Dr. Saul on, as usual, I have my never too old stories. And I'm always looking for great never too old stories. So, I have this most amazing audience. And if any of you know people that have great stories that have something that you think would be of interest to the audience, please drop me an email and let me know. You can send it to wendy@heyboomer.biz. But the first story is not really about a person. It's about something called the Older Americans Act. Have you ever heard of it? I had never heard of it until this week. And it's an act that was passed by Congress in 1965 in response to concern by policymakers about a lack of community social services for older persons. The original legislation established authority for grants to states for community planning and social services, research and development projects, and personnel training in the field of aging. The law also established the Administration on Aging to administer the newly created grant programs, and to serve as the federal focal point on matters concerning older persons. And although older individuals may receive services under many other federal programs, today the Older Americans Act is considered to be a major vehicle for the organization and delivery of social and nutrition services. It includes community service employment for low-income older Americans, training, research, and demonstration activities in the field of aging, and vulnerable elder rights protection activities. It has been reauthorized many times, most recently in 2020, and it is reauthorized for fiscal year 2024. So I just found that interesting. The second never told story is about a woman named Madame Suzelle Poole, who started ballet dancing at the age of 7, and she's still practicing at 77 years old. In fact, she appeared at a TEDx, and when she came out on stage, she was in toe shoes. I mean, I have trouble balancing on my feet, so there she was on toe shoes, so beautifully and gracefully performing for the audience. And she shows us that even though there may be a perceived age limit, this doesn't have to define us. It's really all about our attitude. Her advice is, life is too short to not do what you want to do. It's never too late. Start doing what you love doing now, which is what Dr. Saul is doing. And we're going to talk about that. Invite your friends, anybody that is a parent or a grandparent that you think is going to benefit from this show. Quick reach out to them now. Say, join. If they can't join now, point them to the recording, point them to the podcast. This is going to be an important conversation. So let me bring Dr. Saul on. Hello, Bob.
Hey, welcome. I should say, I'm so glad to be here. This is exciting.
We are so glad to have you here. Let me briefly tell the audience about you. So Dr. Robert Saul has been a pediatrician and medical geneticist in Greenwood, South Carolina for over 40 years. His passion for advocating for children began when he and his first wife became foster parents for several children with varying disabilities. Bob went to medical school in Colorado and did a pediatrics residency at Duke University, and then pursued a fellowship in medical genetics at Greenwood's Genetics Center in Greenwood, South Carolina. At the age of 63, when Bob could have chosen retirement, instead, he chose to accept a position as the medical director of general pediatrics at Prisma Health Upstate and Prisma Health Children's Upstate in Greenville, South Carolina. He did retire clinically in 2020, but he has not retired as an advocate for children. He has written several books. My Children's Children and Conscious Parenting are the ones we will talk about today. And Bob is a kind, sensitive, passionate man with a love for the work he is doing, and he was doing, and he is still doing. So true. You are a kind, passionate man.
Thank you for that kind introduction.
Yeah. So, I briefly said about your experience with foster children and how that kind of pushed you in this direction of being a pediatrician. Would you fill in some of the blanks there on what got you started?
Well, you're right. I mean, when I was in medical school, because I was a foster parent and actually started in college. When I was in medical school, I wanted to do everything except a few things. but then at the very end, when I had to make a choice, I realized pediatrics was it, and got very engaged and wanted to be in many ways in sort of not only the practice of pediatrics, but wanted to be engaged in the cutting edge of what was happening in pediatrics. So got involved in genetics. So did both for a period of time. And when I started practice in 1979, I was determined to be the best darn doctor you could be. But I found out after about 14 years that there was a sort of a gap in what I was doing, that I was benefiting from the community, but was I contributing to the community like I should be as a trusted professional?
Good question.
I was a trusted professional. I hope I was a trusted professional. But I really felt like I was needed to do more. And I heard a talk in 1993 that really sort of had a profound impact and turned my career down a different road. I heard a speaker talk about what each of us should be doing in our community, how we need to be involved in our community. And he said 12 words that had a profound impact on me. For anything that in going on in the community, I am the problem, I am the solution, I am the resource. So it's not their problem. For anything that's going on in the community, I need to take personal ownership in that. And I need to be part of the solution, but to be part of the solution, I need to devote my resources to it. So I am the problem, I am the solution, I am the resource. And I heard that, but I must admit it took, golly gee, 2 to 3 months for me to figure out how to do that, how to translate that. So I finally went to the community, folks in the community said, put me in, coach. I'm ready to be a good citizen. I'm ready to do good work, and I'm ready. And so I got involved in a variety of things. Sometimes, and maybe even smugly so. I was doing so well. And then April 20, 1999 hit, and that just turned me even more. Two teenagers walk into a high school in Littleton, Colorado, massacre 13 people, and kill themselves. You and I know that as Columbine, the Columbine incident. There were things before, and there's been things since, but that was sort of galvanized my process going forward. So I sat down and put pencil to paper and said, what can I do? Could this happen in my community? Yes. What have I done to make a difference that it won't happen? Not enough. So I wrote an op-ed article for the local newspaper on what I considered to be the 5 steps to community improvement. And over the next 12, 13 years, wrote over 160 op-ed articles for the local newspaper that led to the first book you're talking about, My Children's Children, Raising Young Citizens in the Age of Columbine. So I articulated those 5 steps and incorporated those 12 words and set myself on a path now that's, almost 30 years in duration, trying to be a better citizen myself and trying to articulate how each of us can do better to be a better citizen, to improve our communities, to advocate for children, and what can each of us do to make a difference.
Yeah, so powerful words and a tall order. And I want to take that into the discussion that I sort of did in the intro, So here we have this war in Ukraine. And as I was saying to you before we came on, well, I didn't cause that war in Ukraine. How can I be part of the problem, part of the solution, part of the resources? How would you answer that?
Well, let's look at it in a couple ways. Obviously, you're right. It wasn't me that created the problem. I didn't invade. I did, and if we look back at past conflicts, I didn't cause the race riots in the 1960s. I didn't cause the Vietnam War. I didn't cause World War II. But we're citizens, and in some ways it was us. So it wasn't me, but it was us. So I need to figure out if we take I am the problem, I am the solution, I am the resource, change the pronoun, we are the problem, we are the solution, we are the resource. So we need to recognize that in some ways it's man's inhumanity to man that is the problem. So that's the we.
That's the we.
So we need to be the solution, and to do that, we need to devote our resources. So yes, we can't fly over to Ukraine right now and stop the war, but we need to recognize the discontent that led to that, and the discontent that led to the Civil War, the discontent that led to past invasions like that. How did people become so insensitive to other people to allow this to happen? And so, there's a global we here, but we need to translate it to the me. What can I do as a fellow citizen in my community? So yes, you can become very engaged and understand that you need to be doing a better job. And this is a great segue, if you allow me to talk about the 5 steps to community improvement, because I think they are involved in this. So each of us need to be looking at what can I do to make a difference in my community, because that's what makes a difference in terms of hopefully leading to less situations of these sorts of grotesque expressions of violence and hate, much like the hate that led to the Columbine. One,
Right.
learn to be the best parent you could be. Parenting is a learning experience. You're always learning. And not every, and I chose those words carefully because being the best parent you could be, not everyone has the same set of circumstances. Not everyone has the same socioeconomic background. Not everyone has the same, uh, in terms of whether there's discord in their family, whether they're a single parent. Everyone has their own unique set of circumstances. So my job as a pediatrician, and our job as fellow citizens, is to help enable them to be the best parent they could be on this learning journey. Early on in my career, I was, when I was young and naive, my job was to tell people what to do.
Mm.
I now know still before I retired, and even now, my job is to help enable people to be what the best they can be, to empower
All
them,
right. Yeah.
not
So,
tell them.
right. And so if you're going to be the best parent that you can be, or the best grandparent that we can be, um, how do you address some of the hate and the fear that the kids are seeing around them and experiencing them?
Well, that gets to the other 4 steps. Uh, Great segue. Thank you.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
Number 2 is get involved. You need to get involved in the community in some way, shape, or form, in a positive way. Whether that's scouting in your church, donating time at the library. The more you get involved, the more you engage in social capital, the more you will understand what an integral part of your community you are. Number 3 is stay involved, because sometimes it's easy to get involved, but tough to sustain that involvement in different ways. Number
Mhm.
4, it seems like the most intuitive, but sometimes the most difficult, is love for others. You should always be exhibiting love for others. I do not like the word hate, because you should never hate people. You should hate their behaviors. Um, and number 5, the toughest of my 5 steps is forgiveness.
Mhm.
It's sometimes it's easy to say, I will never forgive them. Um, we will never move on. We will never be able to reconcile conflicts if we don't practice forgiveness. And if
Mhm.
we're a person of faith, it's obligatory that we practice forgiveness, which people seem to forget in this difficult time. So forgiveness, if one were to look at in terms of what the lessons I've learned over the years, and one of the toughest ones has been forgiveness. I mean, when the 4-year-old whacks the 2-year-old, and you tell the 4-year-old, tell your sister you're sorry, and he says, I'm sorry. Um, that's a very different form of forgiveness, asking for an apology, than what you would expect out of your 14-year-old granddaughter, or a 24-year-old, or a 44-year-old, or a 74-year-old. Hopefully, we've learned how to do better in terms of understanding forgiveness. And I love the words of Maury Schwartz in the book Tuesdays with Maury. Uh, Forgive yourself now. Forgive yourself first, because you need to forgive yourself for what you've done or haven't done. Forgive others and do it now. So
Mhm.
those so important. So if you're how can I help in today's crazy world where people are killing each other? What can I do? Well, you need to be a better citizen, and that's what those 5 steps to community improvement is to be a citizen, to care for each other, to care about each other, to care for each other, because that's what a democracy is all about. Is being a good citizen.
So, Dr. Saul, as a pediatrician in all your years of working with families, um, did you feel like by modeling this behavior, by teaching these kinds of good citizenship behavior and engagement and forgiveness, do you feel like you were able to influence people to be more kind and to move away from the hate and the fear that seems to be part of being, I don't know.
Well, I'd love to think I did, but I
Mhm.
mean, whether I've had as a dynamic impact as I would have liked, my honest answer would probably be I'm probably lacking in that regard, but that doesn't deter me. I keep doing it. And like when I started writing all those op-ed articles to the local newspaper, when I first started writing them, I would ask my wife to review them. Um, and she said, "Oh, I don't know about this one. This is a little preachy." And I said, You don't understand who I'm preaching to." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "This is to me. These are
Mm.
action steps for me. And if they have any benefit to other people, so be it." And over the course of my career, being, with my little mugshot in the paper when they've published, people have come up to me, people that I don't know, and said, "Doc, I really appreciate your articles in the paper." So I'd like to think that, yes, it did have some impact. Now, it's those baby steps that each of us need to take because that's what makes a difference going forward.
Right. I agree. I think that, if we, like when I journal to myself too, right? Like I don't publish it to the op-ed, but it's what we have to learn. We teach what we have to learn, I think, in a lot of ways. And if we help one person, then, we've made a difference. So, um, so this I am the problem, I am the solution, I'm the resource. Um, I mean, that's a big, it almost feels like a big burden to carry on my shoulders, It's like, wow, I have to pick one thing, right? So my thing right now is to empower older adults to be engaged, to live their lives fully, to feel like we can still make a difference. But I don't think I can take on everything. So how do you kind of
Oh,
pick and choose
I
what
I would agree. I don't think you can't everything in the community can't be your problem, but you have to recognize that it's not their problem. So I think you have to you're right. I mean, yeah, I can't golly gee, I can't solve all the problems in Greenville, South Carolina right now, so I can't say I am the problem for everything, but you can't divorce yourself from saying it's not our problem in some ways. So that's why I like the "we are the problem, we are the solution, we are the resource source." So it's important to me engage my fellow citizens and say, you know, I am working on this, but I really think we need to make sure people are also working on that. And let me give you a couple
yeah.
examples. I mean,
Okay.
the the American Medical Association back many years ago did not allow Black physicians, and so about 15 years ago, they published an article in their medical journal, um, apologizing and trying to move forward, asking for forgiveness. Now, they could have easily each of those docs could have easily said, "Wasn't me. I didn't do it. It was those bad people back there." But it was us. They acknowledged it was us. And
Mhm.
this allows them to reset their moral compass going forward. In the same way, and I know it's controversial in the South, in the same way I think the Confederate flag issue is. It wasn't me, I didn't do it. It was those folks back there that embraced slavery and brought that symbol forward, but it was us. And it's
Mhm.
important for us to forgive ourselves first and ask for forgiveness uh, for going forward. And so
I
I think
like that.
it's important because again, it's easy to say, "Oh, it was it's that way. It wasn't me,"
Mhm.
but it was us. Um, and we can't to help us sort of work through the emotional aspects of this. Then it's important for us to get together as a group, as the American Medical Association, as a group of concerned citizens in Greenville, in Greenwood, in wherever,
Well,
to
and I
say,
like that because it builds a sense of community. We are the problem and we are the solution and we have the resources. So I
absolutely,
like that sense of community that builds.
yes.
Um, so your first book was, My Children's Children, raising what's exactly raising good citizens?
Raising young citizens
Young
in the age of
citizens,
Columbine.
right? And in 2020, you released Conscious Parenting.
Correct.
So, what was the impetus now that you already had this one book about raising young citizens? What was your impetus for writing Conscious Parenting?
Well, that's interesting. When I changed jobs, as you said, in 2013, I was asked to take a leadership course, and I sort of rolled my eyes and say, "Do I need another leadership course?" But as always, I'm better for it. And in that process, it was something called conscious leadership. And I will simplify, but if you talk about a line, when you're above the line, you're conscious, you're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn. When you're below the line, you're unconscious, you're closed, you're defensive, you're always right. And if we think in that line, if we think about or in that vein in terms of, we've all had those 3 o'clock meetings when we're just sitting there silent, rolling our eyes, going, "When's this thing going to be over? I am so bored."
Right.
So we're closed, we're defensive, we're not ready to learn. If
Mhm.
we could consciously recognize that, then maybe we could shift ourselves above the line and be open, receptive, and ready to participate. The point is, we will be above and below the line all the time because we're humans. We're going to be open, we're going to be closed. The same thing applies to parenting. And so, this book, Conscious Parenting, the subtitle is Using the Parental Awareness Threshold. When we're above the parental awareness threshold, we're open, we're receptive, we're ready to learn, we're ready to engage in a reciprocal arrangement with our children. When we're below that threshold, we're closed, we're defensive, because I said so, because I'm the parent. And we're going to be above and below the line all the time. And so the important thing is to recognize, the whole point of, for me, for conscious parenting is a conscious awareness of where we are as the parent and where the child is as a child. It's important for us to sort of know where we are in terms of the day, how ready we are to be engaged or unengaged, or where we are emotionally, and where our child is developmentally. Um, and so to do that, it's important to sort of be able to do it in the moment when the situation arises. And if we do great, so be it. If we do poorly, then to take that conscious step later, whether that's later in the day, the next day, or whatever, and to reassess and how we can change and make that go better in the future.
So, very relevant for parents. And certainly, I have been below the line as a parent and have tried to stay above the line as much as possible or apologize, like you said. But as a grandparent, um, is it my role to also teach and guide and model, or is it my role to just love?
Oh, I think it's all of the above. Oh, I mean, absolutely. But don't add the word to meddle.
Don't meddle. That's right. Don't give unsolicited advice.
Or if you do, do it privately instead of, I mean, if you're giving it to your son or daughter, do that privately. Don't do it in front of your daughter-in-law or son-in-law. So
Or their kids.
or their kids. Yeah. So absolutely. And because, the whole point of conscious parenting to me is conscious citizenship, is conscious grandparenting. You need to sort of know where you are in terms of this and how the child is ready to receive that information. I'll give you one personal example. I think when my youngest was 7 or 8, he said something that really irritated me, and I thought it was wrong, and I yelled at him, and he just turned into a puddle. And my wife got mad at me for yelling. And so we went into that family meltdown mode where nobody talks and everyone just walks past each other for a couple hours. And I'm sure that never happened at your house, but it did happen at my house. And so later that night, when I sat down with my son, I said, "Son, I'm so sorry about what I did. I think you did something wrong, but Dad did something equally wrong. So I wanted to apologize." And I started going on. He said, "Dad, would you be quiet?" I said, "Why?" He said, "I hate it when you're nice." So, so I'd like to think that I was thinking about conscious parenting even back then, but you know, I can goof up with the best of them. So it's important because I think the paradigm for being a good conscious parent in the moment is to pause,
Mm.
assess, and choose. Avoid that knee-jerk reaction. Take that deep breath because you're the adult in the room, or
Mhm.
you're the parent or the grandparent in the room. Assess the situation and choose. Now, you might choose the wrong way. Um, and so you have to give yourself grace at times. But hopefully you'll use that as a learning experience to do better going forward.
Yeah, and like you said, forgive yourself first. Um, so, an interesting question. Well, like you said earlier, right? Be the best parent you can be. Always be learning. We're not born knowing how to be parents, and some of us had great parents, and we learned some things from them, and some of us did not have the advantage of great parenting, and so we're even learning more. So say you're looking back now from our age perspective, and you're thinking about some of the things you did or said, and you're like, "Oh, how do I go back now to my adult children and say, man, I really screwed up, but I loved you?" What do you think about that?
Well, I think, as we talked about the American Medical Association, it's never too late to apologize. It's never too late to learn to help yourself by doing that. But I think you do help your children, your grown children, by doing that. And because oftentimes that goof up is in what that discipline punishment dichotomy. Remember the term discipline. The root word for discipline is disciple, which means to teach. So any maladaptive behavior, any bad behavior, our response should have been to make this a teaching moment.
Mhm.
And I would argue that punishment, especially physical punishment or verbal punishment, is 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 not a teaching is not a good teaching strategy.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, we know it to be negative.
Yeah.
For children that were physically punished when they're children are more likely to use physical things when they grow up. And a lot of parents will say, my dad gave me a good whooping when I was a kid, and it really taught me the right lesson. Well, we know the evidence for that is that it's not good for children in general. Not everyone that smokes get lung cancer, but it certainly increases your risk. Not everyone that was physically harmed when they were a child becomes a physical abuser themselves, but we know it certainly increases your risk.
Mhm.
So discipline is the main thing going forward in terms of making sure that they remind their children that if I used physical discipline, if I used verbal discipline, that was really punishment, and it wasn't what I was hopefully trying to accomplish. Because
And maybe I didn't know better at the time, but I know better now.
and
So
that's why parenting is not innate.
right.
Um, and I think we now know that one of the major things for healthy adults and healthy parenting is the establishment and the nurturing and the correction, if we need be, for safe, stable, nurturing relationships.
Yeah.
Because that's the key for children that end up in foster care or whatever, or single parent families or a variety of things. The important thing is to for us to be enabling families to have safe, stable, nurturing relationships. Again, not all of them have it. So that's where, as a society, it's so important that we do things on a primary level, a secondary level for those that are at risk, and a tertiary level for those that are desperately in need, that need active intervention.
Takes a village, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot of teens these days are, they're experiencing, besides all of the stuff that I was talking about, they're feeling like they're victims to their environment. They are engaging in, you know, cutting. They are engaging in, this unhealthy eating, lots of unhealthy habits, addiction to games. I guess, what do you think is creating this kind of environment for these kids, and what can we as a community do about that?
Well, I think that environment has always been there. It's just there were different tools. I mean, when we grew up in this, uh, pardon me, in the 50s and
60s.
um, uh, there was certainly mental health issues. It was just expressed in different ways. There are now different ways that it manifests. Um, and so I think the important thing, social media has not been a help. I mean, social media has, it's amazing. We look back through our lives as boomers, and we think, putting a record on the record player and then having to change it was a big after after put it back up on the spindle. And now the amazing information that's shared, what's good of it is fantastic. What's bad of it can be so detrimental. So it's important that social media be reined in as best we can, that as parents and grandparents need to understand the effects of social media and need to understand the ill effects. That doesn't mean you can control it all the time, especially if a 16-year-old closes the door to their bedroom and is sitting there with their smartphone or their laptop or their pad. But you need to understand that it's out there. So you need to understand the potential risks that children can be exposed to. I mean, the same sort of thing is with child turns 16, you give them the keys to the car. You recognize you've now put them in a lethal instrument.
You have.
So there are certain conditions that are out there. I mean, they can't text, they can't drink, they can't do this, they can't do that, they can't have more than so many kids in the car. They have to let you know when, and so you have to adhere to those rules. The same sort of thing, I think, should be done with watching and controlling social media. It's difficult. And so the conversations need to be had. You have the conversation about thriving. You should be having the conversation about sexual activity. You should be having the conversation about social media. You should be having the conversation about mental health problems. That if you have mental health problems, it doesn't mean you're crazy, that we're here to help, that we want to help you, help us, or we want us to help you. And if the parents have had past mental health issues in the past, I think it's worthwhile sharing those.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, if you can create that safe, secure, loving environment that makes it okay for the child to say, Mom, I'm really scared, or Mom, I think I need some help, or, Mom, I've been cutting myself. You've got to make it safe to be able to talk to your child.
Absolutely.
And I think that goes to listening, which is one of the things that you talk about in your book, how to listen.
Yeah. And it's not, listening isn't with your ears, listening is also with your eyes.
And your heart.
Yeah. Looking and being engaged.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the kind of listening that when my wife asks me a question on a Sunday afternoon, I'll say, right after this play, honey, as I'm watching the football game. I need to, turn off the TV and look at her.
Right. I remember my daughter used to come into my bedroom at night after I had turned off the light and I was like just about falling asleep. And that's when she would want to talk. And I would, sit myself up and go, okay, I'm paying attention. But she felt like, I guess, with the darkness and the quiet time in the evening and all that was her safe time to talk. So you have to meet them where they are too, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what keeps you going, Bob? I mean, like I said, you're at that age where you could just be sitting back and relaxing and playing golf and, hanging out with the grandkids and traveling. What keeps you going to do the work you're doing?
I'm doing some of that. So I am purposely enjoying some of the benefits of retirement. So now we are leaving this weekend to go visit both of the grandchildren in Virginia and in North Carolina, and then playing some golf. But what really drives me is my career in pediatrics and seeing the vulnerability of children, and seeing those that are thriving, and even know that those that seem to be superficially thriving often have significant issues, and those that aren't thriving because of a variety of personal, family, or social problems. So it's my duty to speak out on their behalf and do what I can. I mean, right now as I wrote in a blog when I retired, I said I might be retiring, but I'm never withdrawing from my
Mm-hmm.
responsibility to children. And once you're a pediatrician, your major role is advocacy. And so that's what I'm doing. And, I sort of got into, again, this 30-year journey that led me to my children's children book is sort of what continues to drive me. And it's even driving me more as I'm working on some more projects and continue to post on my blog.
Yeah, and I get your blog every week, so I appreciate that. And if you're interested in learning more about what Bob's doing and his writing, his website is mychildren'schildren.com. So you can go there, you can sign up for the blog, you can explore some of the other books on there. There's, besides Conscious Parenting and My Children's Children, there's a book for children, and there's a book that's more for other pediatricians, I think.
Yeah, it's more that book is more of it goes over the science of early brain and child development for the first half, and then says, "Okay, that's interesting. Now what do policymakers do? What do parents do? What do pediatricians do?" So it tries to take the science and make it into an applicable policy manual.
Hmm.
But that's a little drier than other stuff.
Yeah, that's not for most of us. So the Hey Boomer show is all about encouraging people to stay involved, to live life to the fullest. And certainly you've given us some great ideas on how to do that. I'm just wondering if there are one or two takeaways you want to be sure that you leave with us today.
Well, again, the role of parenting and in a sense, grandparenting is to raise your children, grandchildren to be good citizens. Um, and then the other thing that's sort of driven me in this journey is understanding and trying to practice forgiveness.
Hmm.
That's a journey.
It's
My
hard.
father was an alcoholic, and there were lots of very difficult times that even though he's has passed on, it still dredges up memories that I keep having to tell myself I need to move on. So it's a lifelong journey practicing forgiveness and accepting forgiveness.
Mhm. Thank you. And I'm taking away the community. We are the problem. We are the solution. We are the resources.
Very good.
So
I
thank
did my
you.
job then.
You did a good job. Yes. Thank you so much for what you've shared. I know that we've had lots of positive comments that you'll see after the show. So who's coming up next week? The guest for next week, his name is John Weiss. And John used to be a police chief out in California, and he is now a full-time artist, cartoonist, and writer. And I get his newsletter. He sends it out every Saturday night, and it is very introspective, not, gosh, I'm stereotyping here, but not what you would expect to get from a police chief. It's very introspective and how he's looking at the world and what he's thinking. And then his art, his cartoons. In fact, he was told not to cartoon when he was in the police force because he was sending them to the paper, and they're like, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. So that should be a fun, interesting show. I'm looking forward to that. And before we go, I have an ask and an offer. So if you like what we're doing on Hey Boomer and you want to help support this going forward, you can buy me a coffee by going to buymeacoffee.com/heyboomer0413. And you can buy anywhere from $5 to $75. And it's really, you're really not buying me a coffee. It's just what they call it. But it's a way to support the work that we're doing. So that's my ask. And the offer is to join our Facebook group, the Hey Boomer What's Next group, where we have lively conversations. It's a private group for like-minded people. We share insights, we ask questions, we build community. So if you're interested in joining the Facebook group, send me an email at wendy@heyboomer.biz, and I will be glad to send you an invite to that group. And before we go, I want to thank you all for tuning in today and remind you to live with passion, live with relevance, live with courage, and remember you are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.